everyone, this is Katie from Katie Loves Classic Books, and I'm finally here with my April and May wrap up. So I am late on my videos. It's always hard for me to find space basically to film where I live and in my living situation, so that's why it always takes so long sometimes to get videos out there. Sometimes I get to be more regular than others, but I finally had the space and the time to film a wrap up, and I didn't read that much in April and May, so I just decided to, since I was late on both of them, to just group them into one video. So that's what this is. Yeah, and I was really busy those months, so I just didn't read as much. I was really busy with work, and which was really good, and I was happy about that because I love what I do. I started seeing somebody new, so that's exciting. And so between all those things, I feel like I didn't read as much as I usually do. Yeah, and then as usual, it's hard to film, but I'm here now with my April and May wrap up. So let's get into the books. Sadly, I also feel like I didn't have the best reading months those months, as in like I didn't really read things that I loved. Like they were kind of weird, but they're still interesting books, and I'm still excited to talk about them. So I started off April with Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb, and this was published in 2001. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So this is the first in the Tawny Man trilogy, and this trilogy, though, is the third trilogy in like this larger series called The Realm of the Elderlings. If you've been watching my videos, you probably have heard me ramble about the other 2 trilogies so far and about this series in general. And I have been loving it, and so I decided to start the third trilogy. And so this is a fantasy series, and the first series, the Farseer trilogy, followed this guy named Fitz, and he was basically the bastard of a prince, and he goes to live with the royal family, and I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but you follow his kind of perspective, and then there's some magic that he's able to do, and that kind of unfolds, and there's a lot of political intrigue, and you find out what's happening in the kingdom, etc. The second series like veered off of that and the Live Ship Traders, and was set in like a bordering land to that kingdom where Fitz lives, is called the Six Duchies. And it followed seafaring people and just a whole new cast of characters, and seemingly didn't link up that much with the Farseer trilogy. Although I saw some things, that started to overlap. And then in this third trilogy, we come back to Fitz's perspective, but now a lot of time has passed. In the very first series, in the first book, he was just a boy, and then he was like a young man at the end of that. But now he's a lot older. Like I want to say he's in his like late 30s, perhaps, in these books. So we return to his first-person perspective, and return to the Six Duchies. And return to a lot of familiar characters like the Fool. Fitz and the Fool play a very big part in this third series, if you know anything about the characters. And it was nice to return to Fitz's perspective, and I love the Fool. The Fool is my favorite character in the whole series. And I do see now how the Live Ship Traders and the Farseer trilogy link up. So I would recommend, if you have any interest in the series, in reading it from the beginning and reading it in order, because I think it all links up, and you really see this overwhelming theme and world, and which I think is really cool. And Robin Hobb is doing a fantastic job at world building, and what she does so wonderfully are the characters. I mean, I absolutely love the characters and their relationships to each other. That is the best thing about these books, honestly. So, this one I probably liked, this first in the Tawny Man trilogy, I probably liked the least out of all the books I've read so far, but I still really enjoyed it. It dealt a lot with the wit, which is this one magic Fitz can do that involves, like, this intense connection to another animal. It's kind of like this telepathic connection, and he has a connection to a wolf named Night Eyes, but the wit isn't very accepted in the kingdom and whatnot. And so this book dealt a lot with that, which was cool. It was nice to return to old characters. It was nice meeting some new ones. I just didn't love it. I don't know, this just didn't really spark me as much, but it was still enjoyable. And then just skip ahead, at the end of May, I went ahead and read the second book in the trilogy, The Golden Fool, which was published the year after this in 2002. And I did give this 5 out of 5 stars, and I was back to loving it again. And yeah, and this almost was like a transitional book because there was like a journey in this one, and I think in the third one, this was setting up for like another journey in the third one, and this one was just set at like where the royal family lives, Buckkeep. But yeah, I really loved it, and I loved that there was so much focus on the characters, and I just feel like it really dealt with a lot of issues that have been dealt with in these books. Just really dealt with all of them, and so you could say it was quieter, but yet actually felt like more was discovered than in the other one. And perhaps I like it when they're quieter, and I love focus on characters and their relationships because, like I said, it really is what Robin Hobb does best. Yeah, so I enjoyed both of these, but this one probably the least of the ones I've read so far, and this one I was back to loving it and being really hooked again. And this was probably my favorite book I actually read in April and May. Yeah, and these books, they're basically what's going on in this kingdom, because there's so much going on. And I mean, you can watch like old videos of mine to like get more bits and pieces as I review the different books. But basically in this kingdom, what's happening is that the world is stuck in like this cycle that is not going well in many ways, and it's just not working. And the Fool kind of is this character along with Fitz. The Fool kind of is known as the White Prophet, and basically he's the one that has the information about like, I don't know, like I want to say how to change the world, but not necessarily, something like that basically. But he needs a catalyst, a person to help him get certain events moving in the right direction to change the course the world is going in, and that is Fitz. So that's why Fitz and the Fool are so important. I hope that's not a spoiler. I don't really think it is. Yeah, so basically this world is not going well as it's going, and so it needs to be set in a new cycle, and so all these different things are explored that need to change, and yeah, and I feel like even though it's a fantasy world, like in a way it's a commentary on our own world too, and some of the issues you could relate to certain things that go on in our own world. And similar to this fantasy world, I do feel like our world is set in a cycle that is not going well, and it almost needs to change too. And yeah, and so it's interesting to compare that, I guess, with this fantasy world. So fantasy can be interesting like that. But anyways, I love these books, and it's been fun starting the third trilogy. And the book I'm actually gonna read next, like right now, it's the very end of June, will be the third book. So you can look out for a review of the third one in the future to see what I thought about this third trilogy. So the second book I read in April, I know I did that kind of out of order with the fantasy books, was Excellent Women by Barbara Pym, and this was published in 1952, and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, this follows a woman named Mildred, kind of in post-war London, although the area of London that she lives in feels very much like a small village and has that kind of like small English country village vibe, but it is London. And she lives alone. She's just a little bit over 30, but still in this day and age, she's considered to be a bit of a spinster. And she has no romantic drama of her own, but she gets caught up in other people's romantic drama, particularly the unhappy marriage of her neighbors, the Napiers, and also a little bit involved with the local vicar's relationship problems. So, This is one of those like quiet 20th century English novels, written by a woman. Usually I like those sorts of things. This one though was a bit disappointing, I will say. It had like some stuff to offer and I did enjoy it a little bit, but it was rather disappointing. Um, it was a little bit witty, but it really wasn't witty enough. Um, it was it started to be an interesting exploration of like changing women's roles at the time, in this post-war England. But I don't know if it totally came to any conclusions or explored it enough. Like, like kind of the desire for women to like be more independent and follow their own interests, that perhaps developed during the wartime, and then their desire for traditional marriage. So there's a little bit of tug of war, between the desire for traditional marriage in this time period and, the women starting to be more independent and exploring their own interests. Like Mildred lives alone. She's a bit of a spinster, but she seems kind of happy like that for the most part, and she kind of likes that she lives alone and doesn't share her space with anybody. So there's that. And then there's like her neighbor Helena, and her neighbor Helena is married, and she's an anthropologist, and she really enjoys her own interest and her own work, and she wishes her husband understood that, and she kind of lusts after a man who is also an anthropologist, probably because he could understand her and she could have love and be able to explore her own interests. But her husband doesn't understand her and kind of wishes she was a traditional housewife. So it's a little bit of that, which was interesting. But like I said, kind of was wishy-washy and didn't come to any conclusions. Um, and honestly, Mildred was just so hard to like. Like, I get that through Mildred, Barbara Pym was trying to bring to life like the females that aren't typically explored in literature, like the ones that are a little bit of a spinster, the ones that live alone, that are the wallflowers and kind of are forgotten. And that's cool and all, but Mildred was just so hard to like. She was too good. She was too much of a people pleaser, and it was just so hard to get on board with her. And also, like, I don't always mind religion in books. I'm not a religious person myself. Sometimes some fascinating religious exploration can be interesting in books, but obviously sometimes it's hard for me, not being a religious person, to understand certain beliefs and stuff like that. And I'm used to reading classics and books set in certain time periods where the church or religion was just a really big part of society, and able to look at that from that lens. But the church played too big of a part in this book, honestly. And Mildred was just such a pious churchgoer, and a lot of her life revolved around the church, and it just got annoying to me. Like, it got past the point of me being able to be like, okay, I get that, and it was just annoying. And so yeah, so I didn't completely dislike this. Like I said, like, it still was somewhat enjoyable. It was a little bit witty at times, the exploration of changing women's roles, even though there wasn't like, I don't know, a solid theme or conclusion there, was interesting. Yeah, it just wasn't enough for me. It didn't really hit the nail on the head, and Mildred, the main character, was just so hard to get on board with, and some of the religious aspects and stuff like that. It was just too hard to love. Yeah, so not really my cup of tea. Yeah, and no pun intended, because there are so many cups of tea made in this book. Um, yeah, so I thought Barbara Pym, some people love Barbara Pym, and I thought she'd be one of those like English women writers of the 20th century that I would quite like, but I was wrong, and I might rename her Barbara Prim, because that's kind of what I think of her writing. Yeah, so I don't know if I highly recommend this, at all. I know a lot of people love it, but I just, if any of the things that I said would also kind of bother you or just not seem good enough, I don't really highly recommend this, sadly. So the next book I have to talk about, and I think I read this in April. The last book I read in April is Doctor Sleep by Stephen King, and this was published in 2013. And I also gave this 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, although probably a better 3 to 5 stars, honestly. It's just a little silly system for rating books, but it kind of helps you like see how much or show how much you like something. But to get more in depth is what reviews are for. So, Doctor Sleep is a sequel of sorts to Stephen King's masterpiece of The Shining, which I actually read last year, also in April, which was not intentional. I think my brother got me The Shining like 2 Christmases ago, and then he got me this one, Doctor Sleep, this past Christmas we just had as well, which was nice. So I got to continue exploring these characters. So Dr. Sleep follows Danny, who is the little boy in The Shining, and he's grown up now, and he is struggling. He's dealing with alcoholism like his father, and he's also still struggling to come to terms with his psychic gifts or The Shining. Eventually, when he sort of gets his shit together, so to speak, he ends up working at a hospice where he helps people to die, where he gets the name Dr. Sleep. And while he's working there, he becomes like psychically in contact with this young girl named Abra, who happens to have the same psychic gifts he has, and so he sort of needs to help her deal with her gift of The Shining as well. And Abra is in danger because this group of people called the True Knot, who are like psychic vampires of sorts, are after her as they feed off the steam that psychic children put off. So, I thought it was really interesting seeing what happened to Danny as he grew up, and that it wasn't easy for him, and just all the exploration around that, and kind of about traits that are passed on through families, whether it's alcoholism or psychic gifts. Yeah, and it was an interesting exploration of alcoholism in general, which is a hard-hitting topic, and to see how Dan comes to terms with that, and also about father and son relationships. With The Shining, had a lot to do with father-son relationships, and obviously since the sequel of that, it kind of carries on, and what the deal with that is, and just all the different issues and this particular situation. I didn't realize before when I read The Shining that Stephen King was an alcoholic, or is. I don't know how you'd say that. I mean, I think he's cleaned up now. And that he was like pretty much a raging alcoholic when he wrote The Shining. And I didn't know that at all. But after reading this, I became kind of curious. I was like, wait a minute. Like, because the way he just wrote about it, so I'm like, was Stephen King an alcoholic? So I looked it up, and lo and behold, he was. So I didn't realize what a personal topic this was for him. So that was interesting, and gave it a new dimension. Of course, I like the exploration of The Shining. I really liked Dan and Abba's relationship. That was really cool. And how he helped her deal with those gifts and whatnot. The part that I didn't like was the True Knot. It was just like this weird subplot. I didn't think it was a unique paranormal concept, like psychic vampire people feeding off the steam psychic children put out. I don't know, that just wasn't unique. I don't think it brought anything new to the table. And it kind of had an anticlimactic ending. The leader of the group, Rose, started to be an interesting character. Like, she was very charismatic, and I was kind of fascinated by her. But yeah, just that plot line just wasn't unique, and it fizzled out. I found much more interesting, like Dan and Abba's relationship, and them dealing with their gifts of The Shining, and Dan dealing with alcoholism and his father issues, and that was more interesting, especially from a sequel to The Shining. And the rest of it was just kind of silly, and that's why I didn't like it as much. That part reminded me a bit of The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. There's a somewhat similar group of people. I don't know, but it's much more complex because David Mitchell's just like a very complex writer and person. And that was just done so much better. So it reminded me of that, but I was like, but that was just like on a whole nother level there. And it just seemed gimmicky in here. So So yeah, so I somewhat enjoyed it. I just didn't love it, mostly because of the involvement of the true knot. But if it wasn't for that, I thought this was interesting, and I was glad to have read it after The Shining. This is, I think, the fourth Stephen King book I've read now. Let's see, I've read It, Carrie, and The Shining. So all older stuff until this one. And so just judging off the fact I've only read now one of his recent books, I'd say his older stuff is just so much better. Um, yeah, so I think I will continue to read more Stephen King in the future. I do like him a lot more than I thought I would in the past. I just think I'll probably stick to his older stuff. So yeah, so if you've read The Shining, there might be some, based on the things I said, there might be some interesting things in here for you, but maybe not. So I leave that up to you because it was okay. Last two books I read in May, um, they're kind of connected, were The Story Girl by Ella Montgomery, and The Golden Road by Ella Montgomery. And Ella Montgomery was a Canadian writer. And The Story Girl was published in 1911 and The Golden Road in 1913. So, I have now completed all of Ella Montgomery's novels with The Golden Road. That was the 22nd book of hers I've read, and I've read them all now, and I really grew up with Ella Montgomery. Some of the ones I didn't read when I was younger, I did read as I got older, because I just wanted to read them all because she was just... she had a big impact on me, and my love for reading, and just even some of my views on life in general. And she's a fantastic writer. So in these books, they follow a group of cousins slash friends who are all living on the lovely Prince Edward Island in Canada together, and just kind of little episodes in their childhood. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's no overarching plot other than that. It kind of is just these anecdotes from their childhood and their friendship with each other. The Story Girl I gave 3 out of 5 stars to, and then The Golden Road 4. The Story Girl was just okay, and then The Golden Road got better. I do feel like these were not my favorite of her books by any means, but they were still okay. The Story Girl, I don't know, it just seemed a little bit more mediocre, and while it still had some of the lovely description and writing and all of that, it just didn't totally hit home for me. And again, I know, again, in this time period, religion, especially in Prince Edward Island, and just the sort of time period, everyone kind of went to church, and it just kind of hovered in the background of everything. But again, I don't know what it was with me in the spring, but I found The Story Girl, the religion hung a little bit too much in the background, and it kind of bothered me. Maybe I was still feeling finicky about it after Excellent Women, I don't know. But then The Golden Road got a lot better. And this is called The Golden Road because she says childhood is like this golden road. And I do say she really captured this certain magic of childhood more in this one. She does a fabulous job with that. Not all her books are children's books, and she's mistakenly called kind of a children's writer. But it's only half her books really relate childhood, but she does do a wonderful job at it, and she just relates it in this magical, wistful, poignant way that is very unique, and she did a fabulous job with that in The Golden Road. And she really has absolutely lovely writing, which really I felt more in The Golden Road than The Story Girl. And it's her descriptions of everything and of life, and this magical quality that she writes about life and about nature in particular that's just unlike, how she writes about nature is unlike any writer, honestly, that I've read, and it just has this magical quality. And I almost want to say, because her books aren't necessarily optimistic, but there's something about reading her writing and her descriptions of life and this magic almost, even through the sadness and the difficulty, that just makes you appreciate life and pay attention to it more. And that's why I felt like it shaped me, not just as a reader, but as a person, just kind of the way that she looks and writes about life, and kind of just makes you appreciate it and appreciate people and appreciate what's around you more, and look at life in this beautiful way. Yeah, she just writes about nature in such a beautiful way, in such a magic way, but also in what would you call it? In like a romantic way, so to speak. Not romance as in like love, but just like, I don't know, she has this romantic view on life, perhaps, and I love that comes across in her books. And those qualities came through a lot in this one and not so much in The Story Girl. And I do love the setting of Prince Edward Island. You know, she's the only writer I know of to have come out of Prince Edward Island. Perhaps there's more. If anyone knows, I'm rather curious. Um, and Prince Edward Island to me always seems like just this absolutely beautiful, wonderful place that I still want to go to one day. And so I just love reading books set there. I don't think actually all of her books are set there, but most of them, and these ones were, and I love that setting. Her characters are cool. The one problem is that these books were narrated by this boy named Beverly, and he was the least fleshed out of the characters. I think these were the only books that she chose that narrated by a boy, and I just, like, you forgot he was narrating, and he was, like, the least fleshed out of the characters, like I said. And that was kind of a poor decision, honestly, on her part. I think all her other books are narrated by females, and she just does that better. And I do usually love her female characters, and kind of the main female character in these books, the Story Girl. Her real name is Sarah Stanley. She was good and, like, you know, up there with her characters. I think the Story Girl was almost supposed to be Ellen Montgomery in a way. She obviously, as you can tell, because everyone calls her the Story Girl, she loves to tell stories, and she kind of was this girl who has a talent for storytelling, but yet isn't necessarily as beautiful as the other girls, or has like domestic virtues, you know, the things that were revered in women in the day, either like beauty or some sort of domestic virtue. She doesn't have that, but yet she has this gift of storytelling, and it gives her this charm, and you could tell, I think, a little bit that Ella Montgomery put a little bit of herself in there. And so that was kind of cool, and Sarah was very likable. My favorite male character was this boy named Peter, who is, there's like these two families and they're cousins, and those are the friends in the book, but then Peter is hired, like a hired boy by one of the families, and I don't know, he was just really funny and amusing and cute, and he was my favorite boy character. And some of the adults were interesting in this one too that they come across, particularly this man that they call the awkward man, and he has like this little love story that's kind of sweet. And then there's this witchy woman named Peg Bowen that was interesting, and they spend a night at her house when they get stuck in a snowstorm, and that was a part I really liked. Yeah, so these were fun, and I'm glad to have completed Ella Montgomery's books. Like I said, just not my favorite of her books, although I liked The Golden Road a lot more. But I just, you know, like I said, even though I hadn't read these before, they were more nostalgic than anything else. And yeah, and she was just a big part of my childhood, and a writer who I will always enjoy. Yeah, but I definitely don't think I recommend these unless, like, you are a hardcore fan and have read most of them like me. Then I really recommend The Golden Road, which you're going to have to read The Story Girl first to read. Yeah, obviously would I recommend, like, her big series, like, perhaps you've only heard of Anne of Green Gables. Well, there's a whole series that I want to say there's, like, at least 7 books or something. And she grows up, so it isn't all about childhood. It follows her through all the stages of her life, and I've read it a couple times. I love, Anne is one of my favorite characters ever. I adore Anne. I adore that series. I highly recommend it. Another series that's just a trilogy is the Emily of New Moon series. She doesn't grow up as much as Anne, but you still see, you know, maybe the first and the second are more childhood, and then she's more of a young woman by the third, I think. But again, a fabulous character in a different way than Anne. But I love those. So those 2 series I like, really highly recommend. I'm sure many people have heard of. If you want a standalone, and that's more from an adult perspective, there's The Blue Castle, which is great, and A Tangled Web. Yeah, and again, these ones were more. One's focused more on children and childhood, but she does do the magic of childhood well. But I do think that it's important to know that she does write about more than that, and that's why some of her books I have enjoyed more as an older person, although perhaps these I would have enjoyed younger. Anyway, so that is my completion of L.M. Montgomery. Anyway, so that is what I read in April and May. Again, it was kind of like they were iffy reading months, but they were still interesting books, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Sorry it was so late. If you've read any of these books or something recommend to me, etc., please feel free to comment below. I do written reviews of every book I read, and I'm very up to date on those. Like, I write them right afterwards to process my thoughts and all that. And I put them on my Tumblr and my Goodreads, so I will link both below. On Tumblr, too, you know, I'm a quote person. Not every book I read do I come across quotes. Doesn't mean I didn't love it if I don't, but when I do post them on Tumblr because it's a good place to do that. Other than that, I have a Patreon account, so if you feel like supporting me, you know, that is always very much appreciated. Always just such a kind gesture, since I do buy the books I read, you know. Support is always appreciated. And I do have some patrons. I think I have like 4 or something. I've had them for a while, and just people have supported me, and I am so grateful to those of you who have. It's just really kind, and that you support little me over here who tries to share her love of reading with those of you out there when she can, because I wish I could make more videos and get more creative with them, but one day I will have the space and I will have the time. But it's just lovely checking in with you all and being able to share. And today is June 30th, it's the last day of June. But I'm still reading one last book, or otherwise I would like squeeze filming a June wrap up in as well. But I'm finishing the last book, so I'm trying to finish it by tonight, or like tomorrow even. And then hopefully I won't have to wait too long to do a June wrap up. And I think those books I have enjoyed more. Again, still not as much reading. I guess I still love reading, and I will never, you know, give up on it or something. It's like one of my biggest passions in my life, honestly. I absolutely freaking love literature. But there's just a lot going on in my real life, and real life is rather exciting right now, which is always good too. Gotta have a good balance of good books and good real life, right? Okay. Alright, everyone. Have a great July, I guess, and hopefully I'll check in with you soon about what I read in June, etc. Yeah, so happy reading. Bye.